We fished 7.5 hours. We boated 67 smallmouth.
Time for the Angler Within podcast with Roy Bilby.
Well, Roy, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Doing fine. Dealing with the dog days of August, and I want to talk about that when we get into things here, because I've got some good intel for our listeners who are struggling with the dog days, because we turned it around. You said you had a story you wanted to share.
I've got a fishing story that, once again, there's no photo, but this happened. So there's the disclaimer. This did happen.
I believe you, but you have to back it up.
I know. Well, a couple weeks ago, Sean and I were back at Crumhorn, location 1, which, as we've said before, we know that there are northern pike in there because we keep on getting them when we're targeting bass. And some of size. We've caught some nice ones, but like nothing has really made our eyes pop out of our head until Matt snapped his rod.
Right, till Matt got his rod busted, and
which is painting more of a clear picture for us in this dominant northern pike fishery that this place has turned into, more than we realized.
Right.
I mean, we've caught more. I think honest to God, we've gotten more pike than we had bass this year.
That's last time I was there for that classic. I caught a lot of pike in the afternoon. I went, what is going on?
So in that realm of discussion, Sean and I were out having a nice evening on the water, glass night. We were all about the top water. We were excited to do top water because it was just not an ounce of wind. You know, the bugs were bad.
Top water.
The bugs were bad. I had the Thermacell going. That protected us, but the skeeters were terrible that night.
The Thermacell is an amazing tool.
It really is. As simple as it looks and how it operates, it works.
Oh,
exceptionally well. It does what it says.
Yeah, we went on a couple bear hunts in Maine the beginning of September a few years back, and you needed a Thermacell, but it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, totally. So we're out, and Sean's weapon of choice for that body of water is a tube, large tube, Texas style, with a bullet sinker.
Yep.
And he was throwing one of those. I'm in the front of the boat. He's in the back of the boat. We're in the tiny rowboat, as we all know as Patrol Boat 1. That's what we were in. We were out there. It's like, I think it might be 7 feet. It's a tiny boat. That boat is tiny.
So dingy.
So we're out there, and Sean's bigger than me. So we got these couple big dudes. Though bigger people have been in this boat, and put it right at the water level. My boss, Ray and his son have been in that boat and took that sucker right down to the lip.
Put the water right up to the gunnel.
So, because they're like 6'5", they're big dudes. So, but anyway, he's reeling in, and he pulls in this tube. 4 feet from the boat, out of the corner of my eye, there's some commotion, and a northern leapt out of the water and airmailed it right into the rowboat with us.
Oh, no way.
No hook.
No kidding.
No nothing. It just swooshed itself right into the back. It was behind me. It was in with Sean now. So Sean's flinging himself around. I don't have my life jacket on because I forgot it. And this boat is rocking and rolling. He has his feet and his hands on the gunnels of the boat. So
and I'm sure the pike has got
and
his
the
mouth
pike
open,
is snapping its
teeth
mouth
everywhere.
Oh yeah. It was. I could hear it clicking its teeth on the way into the boat.
Yep.
That thing was. And he's
he's not happy.
So Sean's yelling at me to reach into his bag. I couldn't see a bag, nor could I turn around right because of my knee.
Right.
So I was, I was paralyzed. I was paralyzed. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know what to do. Sean managed to fling it on the second try with his pliers out of the boat. So he flings it out of the boat, and we're both just sitting there, and everything's calm again and quiet. And we're just sitting there. What just happened? And once again, we're like, no one's going to believe this.
You can never get a picture of that because you can't anticipate something like that.
No.
He jumps in the boat. That's
you ever had that happen?
No. As much as I would hope after all this time I'd be at the point where I could have them hopping in my boat, they don't do it. No, that's crazy. And not good with the with all those teeth, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
In a hurry. Yep. Fast paced. It happened quick, didn't it?
Very.
Yeah.
It was all over in a matter of minutes, but it was that was, and we caught, I don't know, a couple more. He caught a nice bass. It was, I mean, we were throwing some top waters. They weren't moving. It was also on the full moon.
Yeah.
It was on the full moon. So we figured it would have been on fire, but it was not.
Yeah.
So as you're leading up to the full moon, the fishing picks up. And then have you had an experience where when you're dead set on full moon, does it kind of turn off?
It's gone both ways for me. It's gone both ways. I had a 3-year stretch back in it must have been in the 90s. A 3-year stretch when I fished every full moon from May to November for 3 years straight. And some nights it was so overcast and cloudy you couldn't see the full moon, but it still had that effect on the fish. And there were other nights where it was cloudless and it was calm and it was like a street lamp. It was like, practically like daylight. It was so bright. And it was, I mean, you're talking 30 years ago. I'd have to go back and read those entries and research that to see, because it's been so long. I don't recall, but I know I dedicated myself to fishing the full moon, and sometimes the 3 days prior, the week of the full moon, the 3 days leading up to it, the day of, and the 3 days past. That's the magic time, and any of them can be good. I'd have to research it to see if it did taper off exactly on the full moon and then heat it up again, or it would depend on the prevailing weather conditions more than anything else. So, but you guys had a nice calm night, and that wasn't unusual. The weather was stable, so that's interesting. But be aware too that there are major and minor feeding periods every day. I went to a place way up in Stamford. It's called Rexmere Lake, and it's a very good bass fishery. Nothing in it but bass and a few pumpkin seed. That's pretty much it. I'm sure there's probably bullhead, but they're not going to hit a spinnerbait. They're not going to hit a topwater. They're not going to hit the stuff that I throw when I'm there. And the last 2 years, the bite has really tapered off. And I went back this year, the very first time, and I had a fantastic day. And a lot of the fish, a third to half of the fish I caught, were the bigger fish that are in that lake. Typically, you would catch. I used to go there and average 70 fish. And I would go there 3 times a year, and I would average, 65, 70 fish every time I went. Great largemouth fishery, but you would only catch 2 or 3 of those, really way better than average fish. And when I went there this year, half to a third of them were those way better than average. I'm like, wow, the last 2 years, it was really slow here. Now the bite has picked up again, but half of them are full grown. This is awesome. So I went back a second time, and it was time that was leading up to the full moon. It was the week before the full moon, but conditions were stable. I went very early in the morning, and the bite was dead slow. Hour and 20 minutes in, I only had one bass, and I'm like, I wonder. Everything was in alignment. The weather conditions were stable. The water temperature up there, where other places are way in the upper 70s, pushing 80, that was 74 because of the elevation. It's a much cooler body of water. It's spring fed, so it's always cooler than the other bodies of water I fish. And that was one of the reasons I went there, because everything else now was so superheated, with it, being into August, late August. So I went up there, and like I said, an hour and 20 minutes in, I only had one largemouth. And it occurred to me, I said, they should be biting. All the conditions are ideal. I wonder if I got here after a major feeding period, so I pull out my phone. I've got an app on my phone that has the salooner tables, and I check that day. And wouldn't you know, the major feeding period ended exactly 20 minutes before I got there and started putting my boat in. My suspicions were correct. I was there after a major feeding period. And those things I have found to be incredibly accurate a lot of the time. As the day wore on, there was a minor feeding period. The next major feeding period that day wasn't supposed to be until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Because like I said, I was there very early. I think I got there at 6 a.m. 2 minutes after 6, I got there, 6:02. And that major feeding period ended at like 5:40 a.m. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And the next minor period wasn't until like 11 o'clock in the morning. But as the morning progressed, the bite picked up and picked up and picked up, and they started feeding again. And they had swollen bellies, but I ended up with, like, I believe 51 largemouth that day. And I quit before 3 o'clock because I had other obligations to fulfill. But that's it just goes to show you those feeding periods can have a dramatic effect on whether the fish are active or if they're inactive. And we can go back, if you give me the date that, well, it was a full moon, we can look at the lunar tables and see if you were feeding at an off period, because I would wager that was the factor in play there. You were fishing after a major feeding window. That's my guess. But I want to talk a little bit about the dog days of August, because dog days of summer, because that's what we're into right now. And I had an experience, and again, this podcast is about taking 40 years of experience and writing everything down and giving it out in these little segments to help shorten everybody that listens, to help shorten their learning curve. And I'm always trying to learn more. And one of the things I have learned in August, when it's really slow and the water's superheated everywhere else, I spend a lot of time fishing rivers, because moving water is highly oxygenated. And that's a critical factor in getting fish to bite. We went to my beloved Schoharie Creek just a few days ago, a friend of mine and I, and we started in this one pool where there's a little bit of it. There's a riffle area directly ahead of it, and the water speeds up and then it drops into this pool. It's a very popular hole, and a lot of people know about it, but it's an area that you have to float down to or put in below it and get up to it, because it's all private property around it. And we get into this hole, and the first thing we said is, let's go to the headwaters, because there's an area where two current seams come together and form one, and it really accelerates. And the water's low now because we haven't had rain. So it's really shallow where that water comes charging in from two different directions, and they converge to make one really strong current seam. And we fished that area for just 50 minutes, and we picked up 10 smallmouth there, and some of them were huge. And it never ceases to amaze me. I was taking a Ned rig and I was throwing it right into that. There was a narrow band of that really fast current. And you don't think anything can sit there and withstand that current. Keep in mind, there's rocks on the bottom. And although that's only maybe 10, 12 inches deep, where you see that really fast moving, channel of water, and it's not very wide, you can throw right into that fast water and it would not even make it to the bottom. They would belt it. They got to be behind rocks and obstructions just below the surface there to hold in that swift current. Because if you get the boat in, it's going to push you right out. And we were throwing lures right into it and getting belted. We landed 10. We lost and missed twice as many. They were hanging right in that super fast current. But as the day progressed, we went downstream. There's another hole farther down, and we wanted to get to that. And there's a mid-depth area that's probably 5-6 foot deep. Before that, a long, slow run, but there's a few rocky shoals in it. We found a lot of fish there. Keep in mind also that when the surface temperatures are at 80 degrees, 79 degrees, that temperature is only going to hold for the upper 3-4 foot of water. maybe not even that far. If you swim in rivers and lakes, you know the water's warm on the surface. You do not have to go down very far to feel that water temperature change. So those fish, especially smallmouth, 80 degrees is not their preferred temperature range. That's not their comfort zone. They're going to be down deeper where they can avoid that and be much more comfortable. But they will also go in shallow water if it's moving, like a riffle or like I had a current seam, because that is highly oxygenated water. Also, when the water is still, the current is slow, and it gets warm, it tends to stagnate. And they want to be where there's a high oxygen content and where the water's cooler. And that, even though those current seams in those riffle areas are shallow, because that water's moving, it's also cooler than the other water that's that shallow. If you've got a riffle area moving through rocks and a lot of current coming through there and it's 12 inches deep, that water's going to be a lot cooler than a backwater area with a mud bottom where it's a foot deep. That water can be, good grief, 6, 7, 8 degrees warmer than that water that's moving through a rocky riffle area. So keep that in mind. Fish moving water, fish rivers, fish streams, and look for the current seams. Look for those areas with riffles, plunge pools just below them, and the deeper flats and runs, and that's where these fish are going to be. There's also some very deep water in this hole, and we just did not find very many fish in those deeper holes. And I'm not sure why. The deepest we found them was like 8-9 foot, and there's 14-15 foot of water in this one hole, and it was barren. They were hanging in that 8 to 9 foot in the mid-depth part of the hole, and in the riffle areas, the current seams, and right below the plunge pools. That's what they're doing in the rivers and streams right now. So if you've got that fishing close by, check it out and use those areas. That's where the fish are now, because the rest of the water is just too warm. And I'll tell you exactly what we did. Got most of our fish on a Ned rig. I was using the standard Z-Man TRD in peanut butter and jelly, one of my favorite colors, and they absolutely loved it. But we've also been using a lot of the Max Scent baits on jig heads. They worked equally well. I even took a 3-inch Bass Pro Shops Sticko, their version of the Senko, and I put those on a 1/8-ounce jig and used that as a Ned rig, and they ate the snot out of it. I mean, we got a lot of bites. But I want to tell people, I talked about the Berkley Kredge jerk bait. You remember that? The Kredge, the jerk spelled backward. It's a jerk bait that goes backwards. I thought you needed pretty clear water for that. And for jerk bait fishing in general, the visibility we had in that river several days ago, it had a greenish hue to it, and visibility was like 12 inches. It was not clear water at all. In the riffle areas, it was, because, it's only 10 to 12 inches deep. But anywhere there was standing water, it had a greenish hue to it. And the visibility was 12, maybe 14 inches at best. I put a black jig beside the boat. That's how I measure it. And 12, 14 inches from the rod tip at the surface, you could not see that. So we did not have great visibility. I threw the Berkley Kredge anyway. It's got tungsten in it for rattles. It makes noise. And this one had a lot of flash. So I tell you what, you do not need swimming pool clarity in the water for that bait to work. Man, I had one smallmouth. I made a long cast towards a tapering point. At the minute it hit the water, he about jerked the rod out of my hand. So I swung, I hooked him. I went, that bait didn't even have time to sink. And I cranked that fish about a third of the way to the boat, and he comes unbuttoned. So I held my rod for a second, maybe 2 seconds, to let that bait drop. I went to snap it, and I loaded right back up. He came back and grabbed it because it sunk towards him. And that was a big smallmouth. And I had a couple others on it. The cool thing with that bait is you let it sink first, and then I work it a lot less aggressively than I do any other jerk bait because it comes up in the water. Regular jerk bait dives. This one has to sink. And when you move it, it climbs up in the water column. So I do it a lot less aggressively. I just snap it enough, maybe 4 or 5 snaps just to get some flash off it. And then I kill it and it wobbles back at a 45-degree angle. You get your strikes when it's wobbling back. And that was so cool to just give a few snaps and kill it and wait. Give a few snaps and kill it and wait. And they about yanked the rod out of your hand. It was awesome. The Berkley Kredge. Check it out online. Check out a YouTube video. It'll show you what it does. But it was pretty cool. And just so everybody knows, this is, I mean, right now in August, the dog days, they're tough. Once we figured out what to do with that moving water, and that most of them were located in the 8 to 9 foot, not the deep holes, we fished 7.5 hours. We boated 67 smallmouth. We had a phenomenal day. And that's in the dog days of August. So if you're having a tough time catching fish wherever you're fishing, find some moving water, fish that oxygenated water, and I believe you do well. So that's my tip and my advice for this podcast. Find the moving water, find the fish.
All right. So before we close up, want to touch on something real quick. I want to tell everyone out there that we are always open to any kind of feedback that you might have. By all means, slide in. We'll take the not so happy stuff either. Roy often gets accolades, which is great.
We've gotten nothing but positive comments through and people direct message me. You put that in every episode.
Yeah.
And I'm overwhelmed by the amount of positive feedback we get. That's good.
I have some anonymous feedback that I'm going to share from our last episode.
All right.
When you were discussing your secrets that you don't want to give away. And I had asked, do you want to state for the podcast what the jig head was that you were using with your speed shad? And you said no.
Yeah, I said no.
This individual let me know that was quote unquote nonsense, that you would not share this information. And
well, I had a reason for
you did have a reason, but
to disclose that.
Yes, but you also are here to make everyone a better fisher person. So,
Yeah, I am. Okay. All right. And you got me there. I state every episode, this is about helping everybody shorten their learning curve and tap into their angler within. But I withheld information. And whoever did that.
Hashtag nonsense.
Hashtag nonsense. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. If we only get positive feedback, we don't know if we're doing anything wrong. So, all right, you got me there. I should have disclosed that little trick that I do, and I'm going to give it to you right now because shame on me. I should have put it in there because I do want to shorten everybody's learning curve, even if they compete against me, and I'll just deal with it because there's probably very few of those people that listen to this podcast. So what I do with the speed shad, and I tell people, depending on the size of the speed shad, I use an 1/8 or 1/4 ounce jig head. On the larger size, I go to 3/8. But if you look at freshwater jig heads, the vast majority of them do not really have a very long hook shank. And on the smaller speed shads, that's fine. But on the medium and the larger size, it gets a little tough. That hook is way towards the front of that bait. And unless a fish chokes it like a northern pike would, you're going to have a tough time hooking them. So even on the smaller size of the speed shad and on the medium size, which are the two that I frequently use, I do not use freshwater jig heads. Bass Pro Shops has a jig brand they sell. It's their store brand under the Offshore Angler brand in their saltwater section. And if you look at those jigs, they have a shaft length that's half again longer than the freshwater jigs in the same weight. So their 1/8 ounce jig head has a a longer hook shank than the freshwater jig heads, and their 1/4 ounce, same deal. They have a much longer hook shank, and it puts the hook point in the back third of that soft plastic, and that helps you eliminate short strikes and missed fish. It's a little trick I show everybody when I do my demos. Some of the stores have the Offshore Angler brand, some of them don't. The ones that are in coastal areas, like the one in Bridgeport, Connecticut, they have a lot of those Offshore Angler jigs, but you can always find them on their website, basspro.com. Search window comes up. What are you looking for? Type in Offshore Angler jigs, and it'll bring them up. I use the 1/8 ounce size for the smallest speed shad, and I use the 1/4 ounce size for the medium. They also have a bullet-shaped head, which matches up with the contour of the speed shad better than a ball head. But I do take my hook hone and I sharpen those hooks needle sharp every time. So there you go. That's the information I withheld. I apologize. Whoever made that comment, that feedback, thank you. I appreciate you more than you know, because I can promise you there's other people that felt the same way and just didn't say anything. And I don't want to leave people feeling like I held out, because this podcast is about putting out as much as I can to help you catch more fish and shorten your learning curve. And shame on me for withholding that in the last podcast. I stand corrected, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Truly, honestly, that's the feedback that helps us get better.
For more unwithheld information, slide into Roy's DMs over at Instagram, all lowercase Roy Bilby.
And as always, we will give full disclosure to help you tap into your angler within.
Giddy up.